Welcome back to Tiger Drop Films. But before you can watch this video, you must fight me for it. Rip that shirt off now. Today I'm going to discuss the many dragons of the Well Like a Dragon franchise. But for the sake of this video, I'm going to refer to it as a Yakuza franchise, just so I don't say a dragon a million times. I thought it'd be cool to compare the 4 dragons and 1 dragonfish to see how they tie into the themes and characteristics of our beloved series. Remember, beware of spoilers for the entire franchise. This video is going to be full of them. Kiryu Kazuma. We all know him, we've experienced his journey with him, and we love him. Kiryu is known as both the Dragon of Dojima and the 4th chairman of the Tojo clan, despite only being said chairman for barely a day. But where a character such as Kiryu is legendary through not only his strength and skill, but equally his willpower and wisdom, it's clear to see why a character is still referred to him as the 4th chairman, and I'm sure stepping down from the top of the Tojo clan certainly turned a lot of heads too. For the sake of today's video, I'm going to mainly focus on the other dragons in the series, but first, let's lay down the essence of Kiryu's dragon and how it correlates to the themes of the franchise, because he was the first after all. So that way we have a jumping off point to compare. Alright, Kiryu's iconic Irizumi is one of the 4 cardinal or divine beasts associated with Chinese mythology, being that of the Azure dragon of the East. Dragons in Japanese mythology do share a lot of influence with Chinese dragons, but have their own identity as well. For instance, Japanese dragons have 3 claws, while Chinese dragons usually have 5. The little spear Kiryu's dragon is holding is for the year 1968, which was the year Kiryu was born, and was also the year of the monkey. It's also a fun little reference to the series Monkey Ball, another Sega franchise, of which the creator of the Yakuza series, Toshihiro Nagoshi, helped create. There are several definitions that can be attributed to these 4 symbols, but the key here is that they're a recurring theme throughout the East Asian cultural sphere, which in of itself adds a lot more weight and character to these mythical symbols, in my perspective at least. Kiryu's name also translates to dragon, or at times metal dragon in Japanese. And when we take his first name Kazuma into consideration, it can translate to peace and harmony. So when combined, we have a character whose name is essentially a peaceful and harmonious dragon, which I think says a lot about him because he's very different from what a typical conception of a dragon would be, or at least maybe here in the West. I'm sure most of us have seen martial arts films where the name dragon is typically in the title. For instance, think Enter the Dragon or Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Both of these martial arts classics are very different, but the connotation of a dragon is still there. With Kazuma Kiryu, his dragon Irizumi is not supposed to instill fear upon seeing it, rather a feeling of beauty, wisdom, and harmony. Although that's not to say it doesn't look intimidating, because it does. This is because if you provoke the dragon, then you'll have to face the total might of Kiryu. This is what we see throughout the franchise, from the main narratives to all the beloved sub-stories. If a punk starts a fight, then they better be ready to eat hospital food. But before Kiryu throws his fist of villains and punks, the majority of the time he tries to find a reason and talk things out. At least in the way Kiryu knows, since even in Yakuza 0, he's pretty insightful despite being the most blunt he's ever been at 20 years old. But again, that was a prequel. Then in the rest of the mainline series, we see this core aspect of Kiryu's character strengthened, rather than a major character growth, which I really like to see of each entry. That's not to say that Kiryu doesn't go through any changes, but what I'm getting at is that at the moment Kiryu got the outline of his dragon Irizumi before 0, we knew that he had a long, challenging path ahead of him, one that he'll need to continuously show he is worthy of, and one that he never gloats about. In fact, I can't recall a moment he referred to himself as the Dragon of Dojima. Which brings me into the next character with the Dragon Irizumi, Keiji Shibusawa. Now, I'm only talking about Shibs next because of how he ties into Kiryu's story ever since the release of Yakuza 0. For how many players such as myself, he was the first dragon antagonist we experienced because we were new to the series. Don't worry, I have a lot to say about Ryuji Goda because he's my favorite antagonist, but more on that later. Keiji Shibusawa turned out to be the final boss of Yakuza 0. In hindsight, I like to perceive one of the reasons for having a dragon Irizumi was a way for newcomers to the series to overcome their first dragon. After all, the true name of this franchise is Like a Dragon. Shibusawa's dragon looks as if he's turning to look behind him as he continues his journey, with an expression looking rather sinister in a conniving sense. This honestly fits considering he was a strategic force behind the final moving pieces of the game's narrative, working directly with Sohei Dojima's plot. In fact, in this prequel we learn that Shibusawa was driven to become the Dragon of Dojima, therefore being the origin of the title that Kiryu would end up bearing for the decades that followed. The true birth of Kiryu's legend began when he defeated Shibusawa, because that was the last major obstacle he had to overcome in Zero's story. It should be noted that in this final confrontation, Kiryu states that
風間は別格の極道だ。俺には別格と呼ばれるほど看板はねえさ。だがてっぺん取るためにそれが必要ってんならてめえで作るだけのことだ。
おめえはそうやって何でもかんでも計算づくか。男の看板ってのは自分で設計図引いて作るようなもんじゃねえ。後から勝手についてくるもんだ。
A truly badass line, while at the same time being indicative of what sets Kiryu apart from Shibusawa. For Shibusawa, he wanted to forge his own path, however he deemed it necessary, lacking morals ever since he found his father's corpse from suicide. Shibusawa's father was a political aide who ended up having all the consequences for his boss's corruption put onto him. Therefore, his father took his own life. Now, I can imagine how this impacted Shibusawa's outlook on life, causing him to walk a dark path because he saw how his father gave up and left him behind. Shibusawa would end up as one of the 3 lieutenants for Dojima, being in charge of the financial side where he's able to gradually show his cold, tactical, and strategic abilities. However, I believe there's an irony in how Shibusawa effectively ended up as one of the last major players in Dojima's plan as his right-hand man, which makes me believe that he ended up in a similar position to his own father. It just makes me wonder how disposable Shibusawa was to Dojima considering the way Awano ended up. If Shibusawa did become the Dragon of Dojima like he wanted, then wouldn't he have been stuck wearing the moniker of his boss? Nonetheless, this coincides in the climatic battle of Zero, where Shibusawa was determined to write his own history in the blood of Kiryu's, or the Yakuza way as Shibs puts it. I want to mention how in Yakuza 5, Kiryu says,
勘違いするな。俺とお前は違う。お前の極道は死に様。俺の極道は生き様だ。
どういう意味ですか。
同じ道でも死に向かって戦うのと生きるために戦うのは違うということだ。いずれわかる。
Kiryu would never forge his history in someone else's blood maliciously, rather in self-defense or to ensure his family, like Haruka, would be safe. There's this other quote in 5 where Kiryu tells the final Coliseum contestant that I find it fascinating because back in the context of Zero, Shibusawa chose his path due to his misfortunes and as a result only seeing the world in this cold, unethical way. Kiryu, however, at only 20 years old at this time, was already a man who lived for others and not for his own selfish gain. For we gotta remember that the driving force behind Kiryu's journey in this prequel was to protect Shintaro Kazuma, his father figure who was in jail at the time. So Shibusawa's dragon Irizumi is a light green, or blue in Japan, with a golden underbelly accompanied by red fiery flames. He shares red flames with Kiryu's silver dragon, but lacks a pearl, and the dragon's arms appear to be pointing downwards as if they're trying to grab a hold of something in an apprehensive way. I think it's a movement that conveys Shibusawa's desire to claim a title and legacy in a sinister way. And to add a little cheeky observation, obviously green is the common color of paper currency, and since zero is all about the bubble economy Japan had in the late 80s, it's kind of funny to note that the final boss had a green Irizumi, but you know what's better than money? Gold. Ryuji Goda, the golden dragon of the Yakuza series, known by his title, the Dragon of Kansai. His dragon always reminds me of King Ghidorah, but in actuality it's supposed to represent the legendary dragon Honglong, the yellow dragon from Chinese mythology, one that means good fortune and power, in addition to the emperor's reign. Ryuji is an antagonist who is power-hungry and driven to conquer the Tojo clan, and he hates the title, the Dragon of Kansai, because he wants to be the sole dragon. So if I was around Ryuji, I definitely would not call him that, because I would like to keep my face intact. If you need any more evidence, go watch his introduction from the Club Grand scene. It practically sets the stage for his ambition. First things first, when you see Goda's dragon Irizumi, it's directly staring at you, with its open mouth and vicious claws aimed at the viewer. There's no doubt that this image directly informs the audience on who Ryuji Goda is. A Yakuza looking for a fabled battle to prove himself.
お前みたいなバカに裏をかかれるとは。男はのバカなくらいでちょうどええんや。我のような計算高い男は所詮天下など取れんのや。やっと聞いてきたな。せやけどわしはもう酔うたで。酒の次はそろそろ女や。あら。今日の女子はええ。今で育った国の女子とは大違いや。もう先生、宿すえ。
Oh man, those are some great scenes. I love them. Being the main antagonist of Yakuza 2 back in 2006, Ryuji Goda was the first dragon antagonist of the series, and my personal favorite. After Kiryu battled his sworn brother Akira Nishiyama, an original who had the Izumi of a koi, I felt it was a natural and right choice to make the next foe a dragon. Ryuji Goda is the son of Jin Goda, the 5th chairman of the Omi Alliance. So his Irizumi being a fierce gold and red fits this idea of Ryuji being quote-unquote royalty, with a majestic image. While Ryuji is an active antagonist looking to defeat Kiryu so there can only be one dragon, we also see a mix of honor and esteem that he possesses. Twice throughout the story, Ryuji passes on the chance to battle Kiryu after his first brawl with him, where he learns a bit about Kiryu's character. After that first brawl, Kiryu insisted that Ryuji was tired from fighting Daigo, so therefore it was an unfair fight between him and Ryuji. Yeah, it's a bit of a weird statement from Kiryu considering he himself just took on the entire Omi HQ, but regardless, I think it sets up a nice bit of warriors' respect between the two dragons. This is because later in the plot, Ryuji kills Sengoku and brings Haruka back to Kiryu. And then again, following the battle in Stardust after the Omi bomb defusal, Ryuji decides to save his duel with Kiryu until later. Even though he had Kiryu at his mercy in both of these instances, he didn't kill him nor fight him. Keep in mind, Ryuji was 30 by the time of Yakuza 2, and Kiryu was 38. So there's almost a decade between these two guys. The finale of Yakuza 2 is one of my favorite long battles in the series, and the final confrontation between all the players atop Cameron Hills had me on the edge of my seat. Sure, there's several twists where it seems like half the cast was related to the Jingwan Mafia, may be rather crazy, but it didn't detract from the story for me. The whole franchise usually ties into the theme of blood not being what always defines family or identity, and I think that still applies in this narrative. Ryuji discovered by the end that Jin adopted him from his real mother, Seiyun Jung, who was one of the surviving members of the Jingwan alongside Daijin Kim, aka Tarada. There's a conflict throughout the story where Ryuji appears to have disdain for his adopted father because they never really formed a close bond. But Ryuji still admires the power and reign he possesses as the Omi chairman. He also learns through Sayama that she is his half-sister. By the end of the conflict atop Kemro Hills, the puppet masters and Jingwan Mafia are defeated and Jin Goda was slain by Takashima. Ryuji killed Takashima before he could kill Sayama, showing that he valued her as a sister despite only learning this several moments ago, which I infer as Ryuji being happy to find any direct connection to his birth mother. This is cemented in his dying moments after his final battle, after the duel of the dragons with Kiryu.
笑顔見せてくれおかんの笑った顔が好きやったんや
お兄ちゃん
顔や
Ryuji Goda is a great antagonist because he isn't a true villain. At least in my eyes, not the definition of a villain. Ryuji chose his path when he decided to possess his dragon Irizumi, and in his final moments we can tell he knew where his path was going to end. He may not have won the feud of Kiryu directly, but he was right. There can only be one dragon. Between the other two dragon antagonists, Ryuji was the only one who definitely deserved the title. This brings me to Yosuke Tendo, the penultimate villain of Yakuza 7. Tendo is the blue rising dragon surrounded by wind as his dragon is flying upwards. The expression on the figure isn't anything too noteworthy, but I can see a bit of a malicious look in his beady eyes. I suppose Tendo himself kinda has that look going on. The dragon rising to the top can be correlated to Tendo's boss fight taking place at the final floor of the iconic Millennium Tower, as he's the only boss fight in the series with a dragon Irizumi that takes place in said haunted tower. So he's got that going for him. And from my understanding, the final boss of one of the original Dragon Quest games is a bluish dragon, which is fitting since the new protagonist, Ichiban Kasuga, is obsessed with Dragon Quest. Tendo's Irizumi also lacks a pearl, just like Shibusawa and Ryuji. However, similar to Shibusawa, his dragon isn't revealed until his actual boss fight. In all honesty, I think this is my least favorite dragon Irizumi of the four if I had to pick. It does make for a nice reveal during the boss fight, and the fight itself, along with the dynamic intro and quick time events, are stellar. But I find Tendo himself to be more underwhelming as a character. Maybe it's because he doesn't have a whole lot of screen time, or really a presence that is built up, because he has to share it with Ryo Aoki or Masato Arakawa, the true main antagonist of this game. But I had no idea that Tendo actually appears in the background of that Omi Alliance meeting in Chapter 2, so that was a nice touch. Regardless, Yakuza 7 is a great game. I loved it. The protagonist versus antagonist dynamic of Ichiban and Masato Arakawa was clearly the narrative highlight here. that was the one that was built up throughout the course of the game. That part definitely satisfied my expectations. So with Masato being the final boss for Ichiban alone, an emotional one at that, I can see how Tendo is meant to be the final obstacle for Ichiban's entire crew of friendships he's built up across 15 chapters. A test of teamwork and bonds, if you will. And for that he works. The guy technically fought off 7 people at once. With that in mind, he's an awesome end for everyone involved, as Ichiban leads them. However, it was strange how the cutscene after Tendo's battle went. It was honestly a bit of a Scooby-Doo's mystery game trick Ichiban's crew played to lure Arakawa out. I'm talking about Mirrorface and how he helped them fool Arakawa by mimicking Tendo's appearance down to a T. You know, after the rubber bullets, Korean twist, and even Joji Kazama throughout the previous games, I gotta say, Mirrorface is probably the one that genuinely had me scratching my head. Like, who the hell even was this guy? Not to mention that Yakuza 7 already had the Coin Locker's baby twist, which was a twist I thought was executed well. Nonetheless, Tendo's boss gimmick of Devil's Left Wing and God's Right Fist was very memorable. My brothers and I definitely found it awesome. Tendo was once a prominent heavyweight boxer whose career ended when he resorted to fixing a match. However, the people behind the fix refused to pay Tendo, which resulted in him pummeling them to death. So there went his long-built career and legacy. I can see why he turned to the Yakuza as a chance to forge a new, bloody path. And it's clear that after this scandal is when he got himself the Blue Dragon Irizumi. So this Irizumi is definitely something he didn't want to have from the start, to my knowledge, but he probably thought, hey, this is me totally, and he got it pretty late in life. Now, Tendo is given a cool little twist when he appears to help Ichiban during the end of the Omi and Tojo brawl, as it's easy to forget since that's the same scene where Kiryu and other legacy characters are there in the spotlight. But later on it's revealed that Tendo was the one who shot Masumi Arakawa, Ichiban's father figure and potentially his biological father. It's at this point we see Tendo's true colors and how he robbed Ichiban of spending more time with Big Arakawa, the man who was a driving force in Ichiban's story, the man he spent his entire life looking up to no matter what. And in hindsight, it was Tendo's murder of Arakawa that led Ichiban becoming more angry and violent, and therefore leading him to his confrontation of Kiryu. That in turn set Ichiban back on track, so we should keep that in mind. So in the end, Tendo was once a corrupt boxing champion and turned to the Yakuza for the sole goal of rising to the top and having the brawl of a lifetime. He's a big obstacle of an antagonist, and a guy who definitely got the Dragon Irizumi because he believed it was all-powerful. This is most likely how he envisioned himself. I am certain he didn't care for all the other historical connotations given to Japanese dragons and legend, such as the meaning of carrying on wisdom or preserving the will of an emperor to defend others. He may have been the final pawn of Ryo Aoki/Masato Arakawa, but if Ichiban's team didn't defeat him, then there's no telling how big the new Omi alliance could have grown under the rule of Aoki's government with Tendo. With all that in mind, Yosuke Tendo was still a dangerous nemesis. Now that I've discussed the 4 dragons of the Yakuza series, there's technically one last one. A new hero forging his own path even when all was lost. The Dragon of Rock Bottom, Ichiban Kasuga. A man who was behind bars in the entirety of Kiryu's mainline journey. Ichiban's name translates to the first, number one, or the best, which was given to him by series creator Toshihiro Nagoshi and series writer Masayoshi Yokoyama. As a funny way to contrast the character's actual circumstances, I learned that Ichiban's Irizumi of a red and black dragonfish was given to him by Utaburi, the same artist that gave Kiryu and Nishiki their Irizumi. So it's fitting that Utaburi combined the legacy aspects of the koi and dragon to give Ichiban the image of a koi midway through its transformation into a dragon, the dragonfish. We all know that Ichiban and Nishiki share the same awesome voice actor, Kazuhiro Nakaya. If I had to sum up Ichiban's strengths as a character, it'd be a combination of his abilities to form new friendships and his determination to rebuild his life despite having the odds against him. Add all that with his vivid imagination that brings a very endearing side to his character, and you got a perfect new protagonist to mold. He literally has a theme song that explains it all perfectly. The title Dragon and Rock Bottom may sound humorous at first, but I think it humbles Ichiban into a character we can all relate to. We're all trying to make it somewhere in life, from childhood dreams to our 20s and our 40s and more. At any time we can improve ourselves in life. If Kiryu is a mix of Superman and Batman, then Ichiban is a mix of Spider-Man and the X-Men. I can't wait to see where the Dragon and Rock Bottom story goes, and we won't have to wait too long. Thank you guys for watching. It was a blast to return to these other dragons in the franchise and compare them to one another. If you have anything to add, please feel free to let me know in the comments. Give me a like and subscribe so I can go buy Stamina X. Tiger Drop Films out.